Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, Marianne, I'm excited. Last week, our listeners got a chance to hear from Bart Millard. Mercy Me. I mean, wow, what a voice for music. And this week they get a chance to hear one of my favorite comedians, Jonnie W. I'm so excited to have him on.
Yes, he's so funny.
He's legit. I mean, he is it. He's the real deal. But he was talking about the weirdest venue that you've ever been in for delivering that talk. And I remember him talking through this one item. And what for you is your weirdest? I mean, you travel and speak. You're out there. You're doing all kinds of audiences. I mean, from women's church. You've got quite an array. So I can, if I can borrow a Bart phrase, I can only imagine what you face. So,
oh my goodness. I say often, I always travel when I'm traveling locally or within the state of Texas where I live. I always negotiate bringing a wingman with me. And before we even pull out of my driveway and we head to the venue, I look at my wingman and say, I never know what I'm walking into. Yeah. So just adapt and overcome. Yeah, you never know what you're walking into. So this was one of those moments. I was invited to speak at a girls' retreat. So I have done many girls' retreats before, and this is teenage girls. And I'm thinking it's going to be at a retreat center. It's going to be at a camp. There's going to be bunk beds. No, we roll up to somebody's ranch.
Oh,
okay. Horses, tents, guns. Literally, a snake is out there where the girls' tents have been set up. And one of the youth workers had a gun and shot the snake.
Oh, my goodness. What is Texas, Marianne? Come on.
I'm telling you what. And my wingman and I mean, she was just, what is this? What is happening here?
Oh,
it was so wild.
Wingman, was she from Texas? And by the way,
yes.
Is your wingman the same lady every time, or does it change?
No, it changes. It changes. I take different women with me along the way, and she's actually from Seattle. This friend that went with me, so she just is literally feels like she's in the twilight zone. We opened my car door, to get ready to leave late in the night as I'm by the campfire teaching God's word. It was so wild. And the sheepdog that lived on the property is in the floorboard of my vehicle.
Oh, man.
I don't even know when the dog climbed in there. It was just the most bizarre experience of my ministry traveling. What about you? Is there a venue that stands out to you?
You know, I've done similar things outside. I've done, you never know where you're going to be. And sometimes your best laid plans where you're like, oh, I visualize this. And when you get there, you're like, oh, no. But I will tell you the most horrifying one that I've ever done was somewhat similar to Jonnie W. This was with our denomination's convention. So I want to set the stage here properly. And we were leading a breakout. I want to emphasize a breakout, not a main stage. Okay.
Yep.
And I got there and I realized when they programmed it, they put us in the main auditorium of the Civic Center, the convention center that was there. And I'm like, this is a breakout.
Oh my.
This is a breakout. I think there were like 25 people. And do you know how awkward it is to
Yes.
speak to 25 people in a 3,000 seat arena?
It's tough.
It-
It is so tough.
It is. I mean, I love one of my OCDness is, if I'm going to speak somewhere, I really want to see the room at least 30 minutes before I'm, starting. And, I'm a nerdy enough that if it is a breakout and I've got the latitude, I may rearrange the chairs a little bit to
Yes.
create that close, intimate feel.
Yes.
Because I like it to be a conversation,
Absolutely.
with the audience. I don't like it to be like, oh, let me get a microphone and just talk to you,
Right. Right.
So yeah, I
Wild.
cannot imagine what he was describing. So our listeners, you guys just need to be prepared. And when we come back from this break, we've got Jonnie W.
D6 Family is excited to introduce to you Top Reads for Busy Leaders. 12 articles curated weekly for you, for free. Each week, Top Reads for Busy Leaders will send you a dozen articles or blogs that cover a variety of relevant topics, such as culture, leadership, ministry, current research and data trends, parenting, and more. To subscribe to this free weekly email, visit randallhouse.com and sign up for Top Reads for Busy Leaders. That's randallhouse.com.
Joining me today is a 3-time D6 podcast guest. You've seen him at the D6 conference, you've seen him in cities all around the world, and now you can see him in his brand new stand-up comedy special, Results May Vary. Jonnie W., welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know you were just on the Tim Hawkins podcast, so I know this is probably a huge letdown that you're talking to me right now. So thanks for taking some time.
Yeah, that just came out today. I saw that, and I can't remember what we talked about, but I'm sure it was. I hope that there's not a lot of editing. We'll see. But Tim's one of those guys that we can just pick up right where we left off. So that's good and bad. We get too comfortable around each other sometimes.
Well, it's like an hour and 16 minutes of you guys talking about comedy, and it's gold. Yeah. I mean, it is just. I almost want to say people should just go listen to that because I'm not going to ask anything that's going to be better, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys. I like talking shop with people. It's weird when you do comedy. You feel like I don't know. You're not old enough to remember Blind Melon, are you? Remember the 90s?
I'm old enough.
Blind Melon was this group in the 90s that had one hit, and it was this song called "No Rain," and it was the video for it was remarkable because it had this girl in a bee costume, and she's just like a chubby little girl with glasses. And she goes everywhere. And all throughout the video, she can't be accepted wherever she is, basically, is the gist of it. And then one day these gates open up and she sees these people in a field and it's a bunch of other bee girls. And she just like her eyes get wide and she runs and now she's dancing in the field with these. And I think that's when I discovered that there were other people that were weird in the same way that I was weird. That's what comedy really did for me. And my world kind of opened up. I was like, oh, these people are broken in the same way I'm broken. And so Tim is one of those guys that really, like, not only did he help me in my career, but he helped me feel this sense of kinship. And so he gave that to me, one of the first people to give that to me. And so I'll always appreciate that about Tim and just comedians in general. There's just something that we feel towards each other that you can't really, you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, so. I did not expect the Blind Melon reference to already be dropped.
You never know what you're going to get with Jonnie W. I'm telling you, man.
Put that on your bingo card.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was a simple time. Sorry to reference secular music on your D6 podcast.
Oh, we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, man. Oh, man. If Blind Melon's the worst thing, can you imagine a kid being like, oh I found my kid listening to Blind Melon. Now I'd be like, oh, great. That's great.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time that we've really actually talked face to face since before the pandemic. I think it was like end of 2019 and then everything
Orlando, maybe?
Yeah, that was it. And then everything just shuts down. I'm curious, not that we want to revisit the pandemic, but what was life like for a comedian during the pandemic? Like, were you doing like Zoom shows or what did that look like?
I did some interviews. I didn't do any paid work over Zoom. I kind of made up my mind early on that no matter how bad it got, I was not going to take work like that. I felt like I could not be my best at it. Now, some people really figure out a way to get good at it, and maybe that's just laziness on my part. But I kept thinking like, all of us felt like there was an ending coming, and we kept thinking like, it's right around the corner. This is only the fifth wave, but we're going to get whatever it was. You felt like we can ride it out. And then we were wrong like 20 times in a row. But I do feel like it was the right decision for me and what I do to not like almost undervalue what I do. Like if you know you're going to put yourself in a wrong situation, comedy is so, it's very visceral. And so like you want to feel it, and you can't feel anything over Zoom. Like right now we're having a conversation. It's great. But if there were 20 other people with half of them muted and half of them unmuted, it would just feel so strange to me to be delivering jokes. I worked with a writer this weekend who has 1 million followers on Twitter. He's a comedy writer, and I had never heard of him, but it's one of those things. That's how Twitter works. You can be a whatever. And he writes, he's a humorist, and he opened the show. He did his first ever stand-up show as an opener for me, because I was opening for Jen Fulweiler, who's another author and speaker, but she's a comedian now too. And so she had me come up on her show, and then she goes, "Oh, I've got this guy coming to do 5 minutes or whatever." And he came out and he had this thing, and he'd been writing for years, and he has a lot of content. But he said, in talking about that anyway, long story, but he told me in this blog post that I listened to, he told his followers, he said, "I've written all these words, but I've never heard anyone laugh at my words. So I've written all these things hoping they're funny." And then you go by, like, I guess if you pick up followers or if you pick up Patreons, whatever, I don't know how writers actually do it in today's marketplace, but he was like, it was so strange to say things and then listen to see if it worked. And to me, Zoom is the opposite. To bring it back around, is like, I'm so used to immediately finding out if what I said just then stinks or not, or if it's got potential, or if it's good, or if it's, oh, that got the same laugh it got in Topeka, so I know it's still working. If you don't get that feedback and you're used to that, it can really rattle you. So I was almost afraid of like venturing into that space, you know?
Yeah.
So I wrote it out, and I think it was the right move probably for my career. Although it was a strange time, man. There was no work, and financially it was hard, but it was hard for everybody. I hate when people be like, "Oh, it's so hard." Like, okay, well, there are people who died and there are people who lost everything. I don't know. It was tough, and it was tough time creatively, but a lot of people really took advantage of that space, and really reinvented themselves and started podcasts and stuff. And we kept our podcast going. We probably really doubled down on it and put a lot more energy into it because there was less work out in the marketplace. So it was good for us.
Yeah. And even though you weren't on Zoom, I know that being a Christian comedian, you've performed in all types of venues. You do the comedy club thing, but you're also in churches, you do banquets, you've done Christian conferences, homeschool events. Do you find yourself having to adjust your comedy based on your audience, or do you just basically, it's like, this is me, this is what I'm bringing, and it's just a go thing?
I do less adjustments now, as far as, like, I wouldn't adjust something just based on, I hope they like me, because it's one of those things where now I'm not big, but I'm big enough now where if somebody hired me, they vetted me. That's the thing about the internet. People have vetted you. And if they hire you, they can't really get you up there to do your 20 minutes or whatever they've hired me to do that night and be like, we didn't know he was going to do. Like, they know. They've seen enough to know like what my style is. So there's a comfort there. Whereas in the beginning, I'd be like, these people don't know me. They've got my name from a list, or another comedian gave them my name, or a pastor, and I better be on my P's and Q's. Now it's like, look, I'm going to be myself. There's a comfort level that's different. But I will say this, working clean is different because you don't have to just lift and I've got to work clean tonight. I make sure I don't do this, or make sure I take the F-bomb out of that. Like, I don't have those, but there are esoteric references in some of my shows that I do for churches. Like if I talk about a specific worship song, or if I talk about a specific church experience, I might lift that joke out if I'm doing a corporate event, just because not everybody's got that experience. I want to make sure as many people as possible can connect to what I'm saying. So there's times when I'll go, yes, this might work here. And yes, this might not get me an email from the HR person saying like, why did you do that? We have Muslims here. Why would you do a joke about Christian church? Like, I might not get that email, but it still might make people draw back a little bit. So I might pull it out just for that kind of event. But yeah, for the most part, I adjust to the crowd midstream now. I go in with my 2+ hours of material, and I say, all right, I have a general idea of what I'm going to do. And then I let the crowd kind of determine, the arc of it, which can be good and it can be really dangerous, but.
Yeah, well, in your new special, you talk about doing a homeschool event.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what is the weirdest venue that you have ever performed at?
Gosh, I've done so many strange things. I've done one of the worst early ones that I did. You get these opportunities to go do things, and you say yes because you're like, this will lead to other things. They're called like showcase events. Sometimes they'll say, well, that doesn't pay money, but it's a showcase event. It'll lead to other events, and there'll be this many people there listening. And you go, oh, well, I'll be a fool not to. And you go do it. Sometimes when it's a showcase event, they don't take any. You're just a filler. Or you're between, like they're tuning the drums to the next band coming up and ping, 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 ping while you're telling jokes. That's happened before. I did one in Opryland Hotel one time, and they said to come out. I think it was the NRB convention, National Religious Broadcasters. And my new agent at the time had gotten me a gig in one of the, like a breakout area. So they're doing sessions inside. And then there's a breakout area where there's like rows of chairs. And I said, cool. And, but it's out in the foyer. I don't know if you know anything about Opryland Hotel, but it's gigantic. And there's this area called the Delta Atrium. And I was there, huge, just concrete and echoey and cavernous and like 80-foot ceiling. And I go out and there's like nobody sitting in the chairs. And it's time for me to start. And people are wandering out, but they're standing with their arms folded. And I just thought, this is the worst. And then the other part was there's a gigantic fountain behind me and they won't turn the fountain off. I go, they're going to turn the fountain off before no, I don't, we're working on it. We're working on it. And then I started and the fountain was a huge, it was cascading, white noise, awful. And interrupting my own white noise, as it were. So, but the only reason I remember that story so much is because there's a million of those where you just go, there was a ton of distractions in the room and I had to overcome it because I was there and I was doing a job. But the reason that one stands out is I looked up, there's like a balcony area and there's like a second floor that can look down over where the fountain and where I was standing and bombing. And I did a song that day that I'd written. I think I'd written it like a month before. And it was a little song bit. And when I got done, sweating, I look up and there's a guy leaning over the second rail balcony. There's 12 people in the seats and another 40 folding their arms, standing up. But above, there's one guy standing. He's giving me the okay symbol, and he's wearing a beret. I go, who wears a beret? Short guy. And then I go, that's Phil Keggy. And I go, is that Phil Keggy? And he goes, he waves. And I go, and then I was like, it was like the end of my bit, and I literally got off stage and I tried to go up the escalator to go meet him, and he was gone like a ghost. So the spirit of Phil Keggy kept me from committing Harry Carey that day of bombing horribly at the Delta Atrium and Opryland Hotel, because he gave me the okay from on high. So he smiled down on me. So thanks, Phil.
Oh.
I've met him since then. I think I told him that story once because I met him 2 other times and he was so sweet and very kind. But I don't know if he would even remember to put those 2 things together, that he met me later and I was the guy who he gave. But it was kind of like one of those things of like, how can you be bombing this bad? And also Phil Keggy says, don't give up, kid. So it was good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I used the label Christian comedian earlier. I'm kind of curious how you feel about that, because like back in the 90s and early 2000s, we had these Christian bands who were like, we're not a Christian band, we're a band of Christians. And I kind of get that. Like, I don't call myself a Christian editor, but I'm curious how you feel about that Christian comedian label.
Yeah, it's weird because, I think your art should stand on its own, but sometimes your market decides what you are, and you fight it almost at your own peril, when you go like, I want to be known as just being funny. I don't want to, like, even clean comedy. It almost bothers me because it's like, when you say Johnny's a clean comedian, you're almost taking a little bit of the edge off of, like, comedy is kind of supposed to be not careful. And when you say somebody's really clean, like, you focus on the clean, he's really clean. It's like, Brian Regan used to talk about that. He would say, when you get off the bus, you don't thank the bus driver for having a clean uniform. You thank him for getting you to the destination. So like the destination of my act is you laugh. The destination is not that I was clean. Now, some people who hire me, it's an important part of it because they're like, okay, he's funny, but is he going to offend my people? I get that. I understand that. But I think that should be a given with what I do. But as far as how people market you, you really can't control it. I could be like, well, I don't love the idea of just being known as a Christian comic because it limits me and whatever. But then if a church wants to market you that way because it makes their families feel safer for coming to the show, and then more people come because of that, like, I don't care. It doesn't bother me, but there's a time and a place. Like when I do clubs, it can be a way for people to diminish you in some ways, like if there's a club comic and he's like, oh, Johnny works churches a lot, so just take that with a grain of salt, almost like I'm shooting fish in a barrel or whatever. And I've always hated that because church audiences may be nicer. They're not going to heckle you, but they're not going to laugh if it's not funny. I've never had a church audience laugh when I was not funny. You know what I'm saying? I've seen a lot of shows and I've seen some church comics really eat it. And so I think you got to be careful about what you wish for. I started out in churches and I do a lot of comedy still in churches and conferences, and I'm proud of the work I've done. And I really write jokes for who I am, and I'm a Christian. And so I write jokes with that in mind. And there's something there creatively. But yeah, it's one of those things of, I don't love marketing. I think, was it Derek Webb who said that from Caveman's Call formerly, but he said, anytime you see the word Christian used as anything other than a noun, it's a marketing term. And I think there's something to that. When we throw Christian in front of, I'm a Christian painter. It's like, but can you paint? I'm a Christian plumber. Okay, can you make my drain do this? It's going this way. Can you make it do this? Like, I don't care if you're a Muslim, please fix my toilet. There's a time and a place. I think my values come out in my show. It's pretty evident, but also I hate the idea of somebody coming to my show and thinking it's going to be vanilla or very careful or very plain. And families are going to have to roll their eyes and just go with it because it's going to be an hour of dad jokes because they saw Christian in front of it. That bothers me. The idea that might happen really makes me pause. So that's a long answer. I apologize, David.
No, that's good. I actually want to go back to something you mentioned, because I know you do. There's times that you do shows with people who aren't Christians.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, sometimes that Christian comedian thing, we almost kind of equate it with like clowns at children's birthday parties. Like the kids may enjoy it, but no one else is going to.
Right.
When other comedians hear that you're a Christian, do you feel like your comedy gets judged before you even say a word? Or is it one of those things where it's like, if you work hard at your craft and you're genuinely funny, then you've earned their respect?
Yeah, both have happened. I think there's people that are in the comedy community at large that it's a competitive world. And so they're going to decide whether they like you or not immediately. And if you're a threat to them, especially, it's going to be, you're never going to win that person over. That's okay. There's comics I don't care for, or I don't care for their stuff or whatever, their style. But I think there is a bit of comedy is the closest thing we have to a meritocracy. It's really close. It's not full on. In other words, if you're good at comedy and you can get laughs in any room, be it a club, a church, or whatever, you will get work. Now, it's not a full meritocracy in that the funniest person is going to have the most success. That would be like full on meritocracy, meaning this guy's that has 10 times as many followers on me on Facebook, he's 10 times funnier than me. That would be a full meritocracy. That's not how it works. But if you are funny and you work hard and you can get laughs in any room, you will get work. And so I've gotten work and I'm very grateful for it. But yeah, you're not going to get the respect of everybody. Some people dislike you for all kinds of reasons. And that's true of church people too. Church people judge too. I mean, we know that. I mean, church can be a very judgmental place too, but it's weird. I think I've definitely earned some respect from folks in like I do the Nashville clubs here sometimes, and I've done shows here, and there have been people who go, I didn't know what to think about you. Or I did one time, I did a show with a guy who's a very popular comic in secular comedy. I hate the secular sacred word, but word that we put on it. But anyway, he's a secular comic. He's a club comic. And he said he was doing a show with me, and I've done several shows with him, and I didn't really know what he thought of me. You never know. And then we're backstage one time and he goes, I saw you like 2 months ago and you did a show and you followed somebody who was really dirty. And I was immediately worried for you. I was like, this guy is going to eat it. because that is a tough thing. If somebody comes out and they're really dirty, and then you got to come out and they've kind of like broken all the rules. They're the edgy guy in the leather jacket. And then you got to come out and be like, hey guys, what's going on with cotton balls or whatever? It's a tough transition. Sometimes they've kind of muddied the waters for the crowd. And sometimes even dirty comics, by the way, they love a clean opener or a clean middle because they want to be the ones to take it dark. So they want to make sure, hey, you're clean, right? And you're like, but you're filthy. And they go, yeah, but I want to be the first one to drop the F-bomb. So even the dirtiest comic that you can think of, they like a clean act to work with them. So just for different reasons. But all that said, when you're doing like an open mic or a showcase, if you follow somebody that's really dirty and they know that you're clean. So he was in the back, like worrying about me. And he goes, you started off and it was like, they weren't with you, but then you just pushed through. And he goes, and then you just destroyed. And so I think it was one of those things where he goes, I earned that person's respect, and it was kind of surprising, but yeah, they're watching. Everybody's watching though. I watch everybody. And I'll say this too, however fraught this sentence is, but I like all kinds of comedy too. There's comics that I laugh at that maybe would be considered inappropriate or whatever. They're talking about things that I wouldn't talk about in my show, but I go, that's funny. The way they crafted that joke is funny. So I think in that same way, somebody who works really dirty, they see me and they go, that's a great joke. It's not about something I would talk about, or I'm not going to talk about church culture. I'm not going to whatever, but man, that's a funny joke. It's a well-crafted. So you find that you get respect if you just work hard and you get laughs. I mean, that's the part of it. That's the meritocracy. Did you make people you got to make people laugh. They don't come in wanting to laugh necessarily. Some of them are folding their arms. They're distracted with food, whatever it is. And so if you can do that, then you're good with me. That's how I feel. And so I think other comics are the same way. If they see you over time getting that response, then they go, all right, you won me over.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking to Jonnie.
Registration for D6 2023 is now open. For a limited time, you can take advantage of the absolute best pricing for the D6 conference if you register now. The earlier you register, the more you save. Last year's conference sold out, so don't wait long to take advantage of this offer. Join us for the 2023 D6 Conference, April 10th to 12th at the Marriott World Center in Orlando, Florida. This year's theme is All In, all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Register now at d6conference.com.
We are back, and we're talking to Jonnie W., whose new special is out now called Results May Vary. Now, I want to ask you about your writing process. With musicians we talk to, they might make a song based on what they're studying in the Bible that week. I imagine it's a little bit different with a comedian. Yeah. Where do you find your comedy material, and how do you tweak it to make sure the joke and timing are just right?
Yeah, it's weird. I think I used to have a rule when I started out, almost like an unwritten rule, that it needed to be funny on paper before I would say it out loud. I don't think I realized it about myself till about 2 years in. I was like, oh, I don't want to take any chances up here that I could mess this up without, because sometimes people talk about comedy almost like comics say this sometimes. Some comics say things funny and some comics say funny things. Now that's a spectrum. There's people in between. But there are comics who, if I read their material to you, you'd be like, okay. But if you saw them perform it, it would be explosive, blow your mind. And by that same token, if I read 10 Mitch Hedberg jokes to you in my voice, you would still laugh because they're so well crafted and they're perfect. They're perfect jokes. If I read you 10 Stephen Wright jokes, they're perfectly crafted. You would laugh every time. I went to the hardware store the other day and I bought some used paint. It was in the shape of a house. Perfect. You don't need any personality. So I was almost afraid to put myself in the show, and I didn't really realize that till a couple of years in. Now my writing process is different. I write on stage more. I'll come up with a kernel of an idea, and then I'll work on it. And I won't necessarily know if it's great yet until I hear strangers laugh or not laugh at it. And then you take the next 10, 15, 20, 30 shows and you start whittling down or adding to. And there's a good writing friend of mine. He teaches a writing class. His name is Bill Gorgo. He's a Chicago comedy writer. And he told me early on in my career, he said, you need good crowds and bad crowds in your career, because a bad crowd will help you edit and a good crowd will help you explore. So if you get a really good crowd, like the other night, I had a great crowd in Indianapolis, the crowd I was telling you about with the author that I worked with, and the comedian Jen Fulweiler. So she's there, I'm doing whatever. And I was not planning to do anything new because I have 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and I needed to kill because I'm working with a comic who doesn't really know my work very well. And I'm trying to get her fans to like me. They're not there to see me. So I'm like, don't take any chances. But on the way there, I saw this clinic. I stopped to get a burger, and I saw this clinic, and it's an urgent care thing. And it was called Well Now. And it made me laugh so hard. And so I stopped and I took a picture of it. And I asked Jen before the show, I go, is this funny? I said, we have clinics like this, Simply Care or whatever, Care Now. This one's just called Well Now. And I just thought it was so funny, like a snarky, sarcastic name for a clinic. And she goes, oh, that's funny. And so I was on stage and I was like, I'm not going to do it unless I get a really comfortable crowd. So they were pretty warm, and I got a laugh up front with a joke that I've done 500 times. And then I said, this is my first time in Bloomington, and they all clapped. And I said, I drove by. I said, y'all have the snarkiest name for urgent care clinic. I drove by and I saw this clinic, and it was called Well Now. And they laughed. And I was like, what have we here? And look who's sick. And then I think I said some other line when they laughed at that, I said some other line that I'd prepared about, like, what is your optometrist called? Well, look who's here, whatever. So it's just that thing of like, it's a kernel of an idea. You don't know yet, but you wait for your moment to sandwich it between two things that work really well. And then you go, here we go. And then you just jump off the diving board and you hope. And then if it lands, it feels so good, because that was something I knew would not work anywhere else too. So it wasn't like, oh, I have a great bit that I can do in Topeka. Like, that's their clinic. So I was like, if it's ever going to work, it's going to work here, because they drive by that every day. And now you're saying something about that sign that they had never noticed, that it's very snarky to say, well, now, when somebody walks in or answer the phone, well, now, look who's calling. But anyway, that's an example of like trying something that you don't know 100% is going to work, and why you have to keep doing it. You almost need to get addicted to that process of failing forward and trying again,
Well, what do you do when a joke just absolutely bombs? Like, how do you handle that on stage when you think you've got something that's going to kill and you get nothing from the audience?
It's never happened, David. No, it happens all the time.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. You just grit your teeth. Sometimes it's fun to acknowledge it to a crowd, you go, all right, I appreciate your feedback. Sometimes I'll just say that, or I'll be like, I appreciate your honesty on that one. And sometimes if I do an open mic and I have a joke, I have like a book or a note cards or whatever, I'm going up like really raw, and I have things that I've just written down. I don't want to forget to say them the right way. So I write it down. And then you can do the thing of like, pretend to check it off, like, oh, really? That's kind of a fun thing to do. But a lot of comics do that. You just exit out, and you're not really exiting it out. You're just like, all right, we'll get a better crowd tomorrow, and I'll try again. Because I know this is good. I feel it in my bones. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the part of it that separates the comics from the hobbyists is, can you take that pain? There's pain in every occupation, but it's a very public pain. And you got to be almost shameless in your belief that you have talent, and that's kind of the hard part too. You talk about Christian comedy, like Christianity is about humility, and it's about, being lowly and meek. And then comedy is about like confidence. You have to be confident. So how do you be confident without being arrogant? How do you promote yourself without being, it's really tricky. But like, I'm very self-aware, and I'm very self-conscious, and I'm an introvert. And yet, if I have a thought about an urgent care clinic, I feel like it immediately needs to be said into a microphone. So like, that's a tough dichotomy of a personality, but it is what it is. But yeah, you need the failure, and you have to embrace it, because if you don't, because what happens when you get like an hour of material that works, and then this can work everywhere, you can coast on that, because I'm not famous. So if I wanted to, I could just go coast on that. and I could make an okay living. But if you really want to be good, you have to keep creating, keep moving. And to do that, you need the pain of failure. And it stinks, but it's part of the deal. Yeah.
Well, I want to end on this question, which goes along with what you were talking about. Cause like, I have always wanted to do what you do. Like, seriously, I'm being completely serious. I've always wanted to do that, but I lack two important components. One, I'm not funny enough, which is pretty important. And the other thing is I don't have the courage or bravery. I'm an introvert and I'd be terrified of getting up on stage.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you can talk to the aspiring comedians out there. How do you get past that terrifying feeling of being up on stage all alone, being vulnerable, and knowing there's a chance you might get booed, you might get heckled, people may not laugh or even pay attention to what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the hardest one, is when they don't pay attention. Yeah, there's somebody that I read the other day, and they were like, in today's culture, the number one gift you can give to someone is your attention. I thought that's really interesting that we've gotten to that point, that we're so distracted as a culture that like just giving your children attention, or giving your parents attention, or giving the person on stage with a spotlight on him, just to look up from your phone and be like, all right, I'll give this guy 5 minutes. Like, that is the biggest gift you can give in culture today. That's how distracted we are. So yeah, you're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with distracted audiences. I don't know what I would say other than I always tell people, because I have that happen at my shows. That's one of the coolest things about it. Talk about family-friendly comedy or Christian comedy or whatever you want to call what I do, clean comedy. The best part of it to me by far is that families can come and enjoy my show together. And there's really very few things in our culture today that are like that. You know, when I grew up, we had things like you could watch sitcoms together and the Cosby Show, whatever it was. There were things that were geared towards like mom had some jokes, dad had some jokes, and the kids got it too. Now it's like very segmented. You know, you have shows for tweens. This is for a 12 to 14-year-old. We'll get this. The programming is very segmented. And then you have things that are way over the kids' heads and they're very adult centric. And so I really enjoy when like a grandmother and a parent and the kid can all come to my table and they all had a good time. That's really very fulfilling. But I will say, like, there's always the parent that's like, my 8-year-old's so funny, or my 15-year-old's so funny and he wants to be a comedian. What would you tell him to do? Or he wants to talk to you, and then she pushes him up and he comes to the table. And what I usually say is like, figure out places to be funny in front of people, even if it's the lunch table, because I did that when I was a kid. And then like write it down. You know, George Carlin talked about that. Don't imagine that you're going to remember this thing later, because you won't. You always be like, oh, there's no way I'll forget that. It's amazing. You won't remember it. Write it down. And then what I do is if I have an idea, I'll jot it into my phone. And then when I get to where I'm going, I'll look at it, or I'll have a list of those throughout the week. And then I'll get to a spot and I'll look at them again and say like, was that really funny? Sometimes it's like 2 words and you don't even remember like why you thought it was funny. That happens to me all the time. I'll see an old set list and I'll be like, what was that joke even about? But that's the risk you take. But if you don't write it down at all, you're going to forget it. And so really the only advice is to just work. You have to keep working at it. There's nobody that's like, there are people who have aptitude for comedy and they're funny from the get-go. They're just funny in front of people and they're funny in their everyday life. They're the funniest guy at the water cooler, whatever. But nobody has like a natural aptitude to be amazing at anything right away. You can have like a shorter road than the average person, but you're still going to have treacherous path. You're going to have to fail to get better. You know, nobody's like amazing right away. So I think if I wasn't pretty good right away, I would have quit, but I was pretty good. And it was enough to me. It's like when you play golf and you hit the one good shot and you're like, I could be good at golf. You like trick yourself into thinking everything else was into the lake or whatever. But you're like, that one thing, you know, the mind that came up with that could also write like 20 more of those, I bet. And I just tricked myself into keeping working, I guess. And so, yeah, you string it all together and then you got like a new job. But yeah, I don't know what to say though, other than stay with it, because I think it's a noble craft. I think comedy's needed in our culture. That's one of the great things that we talk about the pandemic, the world's ending and everybody. And I was scared, but I also told my friends, I was like, no matter what world we end up with, if the economy collapses, if the pandemic, whatever, at the end of it, when the rubble and the dust clears, we're going to need funny people. There's going to be a need. Now, I don't know what we're going to be worth in culture. Like, is it going to pay well? Maybe not, but we're always going to need people that bring levity and light to things. And so that's why I think it's a noble craft.
Well, to hear Jonnie do his thing, visit JonnieW.com for touring dates. Also, be sure to check out his new stand-up special, Results May Vary, available on Dry Bar Comedy. Dry Bar, perfect for every Baptist that's out there listening to this right now. But Dry Bar, you can fire that up on Roku or whatever, find it on the internet, whatever. But I'm a subscriber. I love it. You can also hear him on his Talk About That podcast. Just make sure to catch him live, though. You will really enjoy what he has to say, and you're going to get a good laugh and have a good time being there. Jonnie, thank you for joining us today. 3 times, maybe 4 times coming soon. Who knows?
Hey, it'd be good.
But we appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Great being here.
Okay, Mary.
Well, he just had so many wonderful things to say.
He
And
did.
it was actually really unexpected. I was so surprised. I actually had to rewind a couple of times because I really wanted to catch the truth nuggets that he was dropping for us. I think one of the things that I'd love to talk about, we talked about this a little bit off the air, but when he talked about failing forward,
Yes.
I just think that is those are 2 great words together, especially for discipleship and leadership and shepherding. So I'd love to know, what are your thoughts about failing forward and the implications of that?
Yeah, no, I think first of all, failing is a good reminder that we are human. So the narcissism that we see in leadership today, which, like, really, you can't fail? I mean, to me, failing's part of achieving. And so I loved his approach to that. You got to be comfortable. And that's the scariest part, because it was like, oh, that's the very, what is it, evaluation of who you are when that audience doesn't laugh. And yet you've got to be comfortable with it in order to get better.
Yes.
Now, Marianne, let me ask you this. Have you ever delivered a talk? And I know I have, both on talks and sermons. I look back 5 or 6 years ago and think, really? Somebody actually invited me in to deliver that talk? And I'm like, you got to be kidding. I need to even reimburse them bus fare if I got paid for bus fare. I mean, whatever it was.
Oh my goodness. And
what about you?
It can be really devastating. That's why I think, let me just couple with one of the things that he did say in light of what you're asking, is there's this whole confidence without arrogance element. And I think we've got to always have the posture of learning. And I think sometimes we've got to fail in those ways. And I'm telling you, it is painful. And I mean, I could just die right now thinking about some of the moments that I have failed forward. And I mean, I look back and go, I am so sorry. I am so sorry.
I know. Now with that, he made another phrase. But before I get there, I'd like to pay a high compliment to Jonnie W. And I don't know if he's listening. He probably gets way too many podcasts to go out and listen to all the things that we say about him. But here's a takeaway I had from this, Marianne, and it'll lead into a question. One of my favorite authors to read after is Malcolm Gladwell. Because not only is Malcolm brilliant on his content, but he's brilliant about the process of his content. Okay. So, when you tune in, he wants you to not only examine what you're looking at, but how you think about what you look at.
Yes.
When I was listening to Jonnie W., I had flashbacks to some of my favorite chapters and books by Malcolm Gladwell. So Jonnie W., kudos to your brilliance. And here's what I mean by that. He's not only talking about comedy, but he's talking about the process of comedy.
Yes.
He's talking in there about, if the whole world, goes kaput, we still need levity. We still need laughter. We still need somebody to come in there. But he also talks about the pain that is associated with it. And he said this, there's pain in every occupation. And I got to thinking, our listeners, I want you to think about the pain that you face as part of what you do and say, man, I try to avoid that at all costs. But what does it do to bring you to be a better blank, whether you're a ministry leader, a children's pastor, does the pain refine you? Does the pain cause you to get stronger? Does the pain cause you to better prepare? Yeah. Marianne, Phil, you jump with that. What does your mind do with that?
Oh, I'm over here just shaking my head, and we have a choice to make. Yeah. I love that you're posing that, because I think in everything we're doing, parenting, marriage, ministry, all of it that comes up underneath the vision of D6 family. There is pain facing every one of us, whether it be your 15-year-old who's battling defiance and whatever it is. We all are facing pain in every one of those leadership moments, and we have a choice to make in those moments. Am I going to choose to learn and lean into the pain, which I'll be honest with you guys, in my human heart, this girl right here doesn't want pain. I feel like the human response to pain is avoid, 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 avoid. I don't want to feel that. And that's where I think narcissism and arrogance creep in, is we get autonomy. We get this autonomy where we begin to kind of flex our muscles a little bit. And I mean that kind of figuratively of, I don't want to suffer here. I don't want to, you're trying to sanctify something in me, God, and I don't like it. But scripture is very clear, very, very clear from Genesis to Revelation, that the refining fire produces good in us. So could I just challenge our listeners today to think about what is the pain point and make the choice to turn towards it with God instead of maybe avoiding it?
Yeah. Growth comes after pain, for sure. Healing comes after pain, and certainly a refining process. Well, this is some good areas to lean into. Next week, we're going to be visiting with Mahogany Dudley Finley, a discipleship leader and trainer for INCM, and we're excited to have her. We're praying for you to lean into your occupation, whatever it is that you're listening, ministry, if you're in the corporate structure or the service industry, whatever it is, you've got pain, you've got challenges, and there is failure. And I think taking it from Jonnie W, we can be better this week at what we do. We'll talk to you next week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.